Okay? If you're interested in taking notes, you can do that. Two types of evil. There's the moral evil and there's the natural evil. The moral evil is basically sin. It's the evil we do. The natural evil is suffering. It's the evil we suffer. That's it. Two types of evil. And there are two perspectives on evil. There is the logical perspective and the emotional or existential perspective. The logical perspective asks these questions. Where did evil come from? It addresses the origin of evil. Where did evil come from? The emotional perspective says, why do I suffer? Where is God in the midst of my suffering? The logical says, how can a good God allow evil to exist? The emotional says, where is God in the midst of my suffering? To address the logical problem of evil, I must use the faculties of reason, my mind, my intellect. To address the emotional problem or the emotional challenge, I appeal to the promises in the scriptures. In short, the logical perspectives speak to the head, to the mind. The emotional speaks to the heart. What I will be speaking with you on is the logical perspective, and Abuna David, tomorrow, God willing, will speak to the emotional perspective of suffering. Correct me if I'm wrong, Abuna. Yes? So this is what we will discuss tonight and Sunday, and all of Saturday will be the emotional perspective. So remember, two types of evil, two perspectives of evil. What are the types? The moral, the natural. The perspectives, how you address the problem of evil logically or emotionally. So far, so good? Now can we delve into the logical problem of evil? Okay, are you with me? All right. What is the problem? I have three problems to share with you and three solutions. Problem number one. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you, my friends, is because you will, if you haven't yet, when you go to college and even beyond college, you will be challenged by those who deny the existence of God. And they say, why is there so much evil in this world? How can your God, who's supposed to be all loving and all nice and all of that, allow all this suffering in this world? And if you were not challenged by others, you yourself may be asking yourself this question. How can I reconcile a loving God with all the evil in this world? Is there a shortage of evil in this world? No. Evil is every single day. You just turn on the TV, watch 10 o'clock news for 5 minutes, you'll see all the evil in this world unfold right before your eyes. So, all right, what is the problem of evil and suffering? Listen, let's pay attention to this problem. The problem or the argument that atheists use to justify their rejection of God is as follows. Do you know what a syllogism is? It's when you have premise 1, premise 2, and then the conclusion. The conclusion is usually based on the validity of the premises. That's the syllogism. Okay? And let me explain to you the syllogism in the problem of evil. First premise, or major premise, it says, an all-loving God would want to destroy evil. Okay? What is this minor premise? An all-powerful God would be able to destroy evil. Another minor premise, evil exists. What's the conclusion that follows from this logical format or logical syllogism? Is that an all-powerful, all-loving God does not exist. And I hear this argument all the time whenever I go to speak to atheists on college campuses or in conferences. I always get this argument. It sounds pretty solid. It makes perfect sense. I mean, look at it. If an all-loving God exists, he would want to destroy evil. And if he's all-powerful, he would be able to destroy evil. but evil exists. Well, therefore, this God is not all loving, not all powerful, doesn't even exist. So, before I go on, I want to tell you that if I don't agree with the conclusion, remember, this is called a syllogism. Okay? Premise, conclusion. The conclusion follows to be true if the premises are valid and factual and true. But if I have a problem with the conclusion, I need to go back and check the premises and see if there is a logical fallacy in any of these premises. So my question to you, raise your hand. Tell me, what is the problem with this problem? Raise your hand and tell me. I hope you don't all agree with it, because if we all agree with it, then God doesn't exist and we're wasting our time. What is the problem? Yes, sir. Well, you went 7 steps ahead. Give me the problem with the premises. Is there a problem with this premise and this premise? God does not want to destroy evil?
I mean, He allows it.
He allows it.
For it to load.
Yes. Say more. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Say more. You're right. He allows it. Why does He allow it?
Free will.
Okay. You basically went to the conclusion right away. The gift of free will. Yes. What else?
I was about to say that if you talk with an atheist and you tell them that we're talking about a God in the sense of like a God, He's going to be able to do a lot more than destroy evil and be wanting to destroy evil. So if they're saying that just because a God in their definition is not, in their definition, all powerful and all loving, then they're limiting the definition of what a God is because they're willing to have their eyes closed.
Very good. I like your perspective. Very good, insightful comments. Somebody had their hand up. Yes. Speak up.
Well, being evil would be like a choice. So if it's like a choice, and then He destroys evil, He would basically be destroying a person's choice.
Excellent. What's your name?
George.
George. I love what you said. I think it's Mark. You said pretty much the same thing Mark said. Beautiful. Spot on. So let's look at this argument and see the first problem with the argument. What is the first problem? The first problem is the first premise. I don't agree with that premise. Why? Because an all-loving God, as Mark said, and as George said, would give you a gift. What is that gift? It's called free will. An all-loving God gives you the gift of freedom, because love cannot be substantiated as love unless it's freely given and freely received. That's what love is. God created us as beings who are capable to freely love Him back. Not to be compelled to love Him, but to freely love Him. But freely loving Him also means freely rejecting Him. So I have a problem with this first premise, because an all-loving God would want to destroy evil, and the person who made that argument conveniently omitted the gift of freedom in that loving God. Conveniently omitted that piece. But an all-loving God means that He has to give me the gift of free will. Let's listen to what C.S. Lewis, who's a famous Christian author and apologist, in his book Mere Christianity. This is what he said. God created us with free will, freedom to choose. Some people think they can imagine a creature which was free, but had no possibility of going wrong or doing wrong. I cannot. If I am free to be good, I'm also free to be bad. And free will is what has made evil possible. See, free will is what has made evil possible. Why then did God give us free will? Question that we also ask ourselves. Because it is the only thing that makes possible any love or goodness or joy worth having. A world of creatures that work like machines would hardly be worth creating. Another apologist and philosopher, many consider this guy, Alvin Plantinga, as the greatest philosopher of the 21st century. You can look him up, Alvin Plantinga. And he had extensive research on the problem of evil and suffering. He said, now God can create free creatures, but He cannot cause them to do only what is right. For if He does, then they are not significantly free after all. To create creatures capable of moral goodness, He must create creatures capable of moral evil as well. And God does not want to create robots that can only do right or good. So, the second problem with the argument. So remember, the first premise has logical fallacies. I also have a problem with the second premise. An all-powerful God would be able to destroy evil. Wrong. Let's listen to, or let's ask this question first. Can God do anything? Here's a shocker for you. No. Oh, wait a minute. I think Abunas will get upset at me right now. I think I blasphemed. Can God do anything? No. He can do only that which is consistent with His essence and nature. He cannot do that which is illogical. And let me explain. But that doesn't speak to His lack of omnipotence. If I say God cannot do something, it doesn't mean that He is powerless. It basically means that this is illogical. Let me explain. God can only do that which is aligned with His nature. Which means God cannot give me love and freedom and then withdraw it back from me. Here are some things that God cannot do. God cannot lie. Oh, wait a minute, but I thought God can do anything. But God cannot lie. If you want to understand this verse, what is lying? Lying is something you do not do rather than something you do. What is lying? Now that I explained it to you. What is lying? You don't do what? You don't tell the truth. And what is God? Our God is the God of truth. So He cannot be God and not God. Do you get it? So in this case, is lying something you do or you don't do? It's something you don't do. So when I say God cannot lie, God cannot contradict Himself because He is the truth. Yes.
I remembered something. So in Psalm 50, there's a part that says, "For behold, you have loved the truth." So He cannot lie and love the truth.
Beautiful. Exactly. Thank you, Nadine. He cannot lie because He loves the truth. God cannot change. That's a verse. God cannot not love. All of these things do not put limitations on the all-powerfulness of God. It's not like our God is weak and He cannot do these things. He just cannot contradict His essence and His nature. Are you all clear with that? So when I said, can God do anything? Yes, He can do anything and everything that is consistent with His essence. That is logical, because our God is a reasonable, logical God. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So, listen to what C.S. Lewis said in his book, The Problem of Pain. Listen, this is very, very beautiful to respond to the second premise. If you choose to say God can give a creature free will and at the same time withhold free will from it, you have not succeeded in saying anything about God. Meaningless combinations of words do not suddenly acquire meaning simply because we prefix to them the two words God can. Do you get it now? So, do I have a problem with the problem of evil? Yes. These two premises right here have logical fallacies. Therefore, the conclusion doesn't follow. Therefore, I don't agree with your conclusion that a loving God, an all-powerful God, doesn't exist. Here's a summary of the first problem and the first solution to the problem. I want you to pay attention to this slide because this basically pulls it all together. Where there is love, there must be freedom, or else it wouldn't be love. Are you with me? Where there's freedom, there must be a choice, or else free to do what? If I don't have a choice, as you said, George, if I don't have a choice, then I'm not really free. I need to exercise this freedom. Where there is a choice, there is the possibility of choosing evil. And when there is the possibility of choosing evil, there's the possibility of suffering. Do you see how this pulls it all together? Okay, let me do that one more time. Where there's love, there's freedom, must be freedom. Where there's freedom, there must be a choice. Where there's a choice, there's a possibility of choosing evil. And when there is evil, where there is evil, there's the possibility of what? Suffering. Do you see how that goes all the way back to love? Any question on this so far? Does it make sense? And the reason why I'm sharing this with you, again, I'm speaking to your mind and your head. It would be insufficient if we just leave it at that. Thank God, Abuna David will continue to speak to your heart tomorrow so that we can have that bridge between the head and the heart. Will satisfy our intellect, will also nourish our hearts. All right, let's assume that God had options. I call this the Creator's options. If He were to create nothing, there would be no love in existence. If He were to create being who cannot choose, that doesn't also allow for the existence of love. If He were to create beings who can only choose good, you still cannot have love. But if He creates being who can freely choose good and evil, only then will you have the presence of love. Do you see? So the problem of evil and suffering, the solution of it is dependent upon two things. As you said beautifully, Mark, free will that is a result of the love of God. It's so interesting that the problem of evil and suffering stems from a loving God, which on the surface they both seem to be contradictory, antithetical to one another. But it's because God loves us that He allowed us to be free. And because we're free, we have chosen to reject or to disobey and so on. Are you ready for the second problem? Well, want to take a pause? Go to the second problem. Go to the first problem. I have 4 problems. We will do 2 today and 2 on Sunday. We all have problems. So the second problem of evil. The first problem dealt with the existence of evil. The second problem deals with the nature of evil. Here's the problem atheists also use. God is the creator of everything. Okay, that's premise number 1. What's premise number 2? Evil is something. Okay, what's the conclusion? Therefore, God is the creator of evil. That seems like it's a pretty logical syllogism. What do y'all think? I don't like the conclusion. Yes, Maiden. Beautiful. You got to say this in the microphone because it's spot on.
Evil is not something, it is the lack of something.
Beautiful. As Maiden said, the problem with the argument is that evil is not something that is to be created. Evil in its essence, the word here is ontological. Ontology means the essence or the nature of something. Ontologically speaking, essentially speaking, evil is not something. What is evil? Here's what St. Augustine said in the book, his famous book, City of God. Here's what St. Augustine said. Evil has no nature in itself, but the loss of good has received the name evil. And another saint, St. Thomas Aquinas, he said, evil is not a divine creation, but rather a term created by us humans in our attempt to explain the deprivation of good. Like what? I'll give you examples. Death is what, in essence? George? The loss of life. Darkness is the loss of light. How about cold? Can you measure cold? It's the absence of heat. You see, what is evil? The absence of good. All right, here is again back to C.S. Lewis in his book Mere Christianity. He said, when I was an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But listen carefully to what he says next. How had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. In other words, when you say this is evil, you're presupposing and implying that you have an idea of what good is, or else you wouldn't know that this is evil. I'll give you a simpler example. If I say this clicker that I have is old, what am I implying? That there's a new one that I know of. Because if I don't know that there's a new one out there, would I know this is old? So by saying this is old, I am also saying there's a new one out there. So when I say this is evil, I'm implying, I'm saying what? There's good out there. Here's the question of all questions for atheists. I have asked, hundreds, tens of atheists this question. I'm yet to find a logically coherent answer to this question. What is good? Because you say this is evil, you're implying that there's something that is good, which the deprivation thereof makes it evil. What is good? How do you define good? Where does goodness come from? Zero response. To the point where, and you'll see this next, Richard Dawkins, who is one of the most famous atheists out there, out of Oxford University in England, he's on record in his book, River Out of Eden, page 122. He says, in this world, there's no good, there's no evil, there's no design. And I respect what he said. I don't agree with it, obviously, but I respect what he said because he's consistent with his atheistic school of thought. As an atheist, you cannot define good. As an atheist, you cannot define evil. And I challenged so many atheists. No response to what is good, what is evil. All right. So you see, Michael Peterson and Chad Meister, they both professors of philosophy. They both said, and they're both non-Christians, by the way. They both said it's reasonable to say that the logical problem of evil has been laid to rest. It's now widely accepted that the logical problem of evil has been sufficiently rebutted. So I will end with this, because I want to get some of your questions as well. Is evil only a problem for Christians? When someone comes and tells me, and it happened many times in the past, hey George, I don't believe in your God because of all the evil and suffering in this world. I shouldn't be the only one who would offer a response. What you should do is to do something like, in legal terms, to reverse the burden of proof. Well, can you give me a solution to the problem of evil as an atheist? This is not just a problem for me as a Christian to respond to. Evil is a problem for everyone. Atheists, Buddhists, Hindus, skeptics, agnostics, Muslims, Jews, every single school of thought, religion, worldview out there must have what? A diagnosis and a solution to the problem of evil and suffering. And both diagnosis and solution must meet both the intellectual and the emotional demand of the question. You need to give me a logically coherent answer and an emotionally satisfying answer to the problem of evil and suffering. Diagnose it, solve it. And if you study religions, if you study atheism, all the isms of the world, you will not get a logical diagnosis or a solution to the problem of evil. Only in Christianity you'll find a diagnosis and a solution to the problem of evil. And I'll prove it to you very quickly. Evil is a bigger problem for atheists. Why? As I mentioned, because every judgment presupposes some kind of standard. What is the standard for judging an act to be evil? None exists. For an atheist, what is the standard? None exists. That's why, here you go. River Out of Eden, Darwinian View of Life. Here's Richard Dawkins. This is what I was quoting to you earlier. Richard Dawkins on record, and he's, by the way, the most vocal, aggressive atheist out there. He says, in a universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt. Other people are going to get lucky. And you will not find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe we observe has no design, no purpose, no evil, and no other good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. That is the explanation of evil from an atheistic perspective. Just what Richard Dawkins has on the screen, or what he has written in his book, if I were there, I would have loved to have asked him a question. Simple question. To point out the logic. Okay? And let me just teach you some critical thinking. What is the problem with what he said? DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. I would say, Mr. Dawkins, then how do you know that DNA doesn't know? Because if DNA doesn't know, then you wouldn't know. So do you have that privileged perspective where you know everything and we're all blind and clueless and don't know anything? Because if DNA doesn't know, then you wouldn't also know. But he claims to know. Do you get it? So this is what Richard Dawkins is saying. He wanted to say something, why didn't? Okay. So questions for atheists. Here you go. What is good? What standard do you use to say this is good and this is evil? And how does that work in a universe where there is no moral absolutes? Where do you get good and evil from? Do you see the inconsistency in the atheist? Why am I saying atheist, atheist, atheist? Because, my dear friends, we are going to be challenged when on school campuses. By the way, this is the epicenter of the challenge. This is on the academic world in general. On school campuses, you will be challenged. Why does God exist? And how do you claim that he exists? And what about the evil? And I don't believe in him. And I have my argument and all of that. You need to be equipped and armed before you go to college and before you address any of these questions with the truth. Seldom will you find people that will come into you and say, hey, I'm an atheist. Why are you a believer? They're not going to be very in your face like that, but they will be more subtle. You will have, I was actually having a conversation with Justin driving in. I said, you will be challenged morally and intellectually. And they're not going to come to you in your face, but you will see the challenge. And Justin, you want to share something? Share with what you shared with me earlier when those people who, atheists who were very vocal on.
Yeah, I mean, I went to orientation for college, and just right away, the first introduction, they had their 5 leadership students, I guess, and all 5 of them had some sort of LGBTQ or some atheist or very secular idea that they were forced to kind of push onto you. And forced you to.
Secular humanism, naturalism, of course the LGBTQ agenda, all of these things are antithetical to our faith. They're contradictory to our Christian faith. How do we deal with that? I mean, talking about those things, this needs a whole conference by itself. We're just talking about just one small piece of it. We can't address everything. All right. I said I'm going to finish with this thought. I'm going to skip this. So, when atheists complain about the evil in this world, you know what they really do? They steal goodness from God to make sense of their argument or their complaint. And there's a book called Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case, by Frank Turek, who's actually a friend of mine. So, you cannot logically, as an atheist, complain about the problem of evil in this world. Here is the response when I ask atheists, so what is your solution? أنت مش عاجبك my solution? Fine. What is your solution to evil and suffering? You know what they usually say? Tough luck. It is what it is. That's life. Oh well. All of these responses, there's nothing else that they can offer. All right, I'll skip you all of this and I'll just get to the solution very quickly. Christianity is the only faith, now I'm talking about the solution, that accepts the reality of evil and suffering. We don't think it's an illusion like Eastern mystics, like Buddhists, for example, who think that evil is just an illusion in your mind. We do accept the reality of evil. Not only that, we can, as Christians, explain both the purpose of evil and the cause of evil. We can explain that. Most importantly, only in Christianity, you'll have God-given strength and grace to survive it, and that's what Abuna David will discuss with us tomorrow. Only in Christianity, you'll have the acceptance, the explanation, and the strength. In no other religion will you have any of those three, and I challenge anyone who's a Buddhist or a Hindu or an atheist or any of the other religions that will give me those three as in solution. So the answer is in Christ. He provides the solution and the explanation. Because the problem of evil, my friends, is a mystery and a problem. A mystery needs an explanation. A problem needs a solution. Only in Christ will you have an explanation to the mystery and a solution to the problem. And where is that? It's in the cross. Here is his solution to suffering. He came to us, wept, suffered. He transformed the meaning of suffering. He died on the cross, transformed the meaning of death. He rose from the dead, transformed the meaning of life. And that is what we have in 2 Corinthians. I will stop at this point, and next time when we meet on Sunday, God willing, I will show you how we can use evil as an argument to prove that God exists. And I think I have mentioned some of these points in my previous, in the last 30 minutes, but I will show you even more reasons why I use evil to prove that God exists. So, any questions on or comments on what we have discussed so far? I am done. This is now your time. If you have any comments, questions, objections, anything? Yes, Maiden.
When Richard Dawkins said that DNA just is, he was, if I understand correctly, he was talking about evolution, why we have it, right?
Right. He's an evolutionist. He's an evolutionary biologist.
So if DNA just is and it does not know, then wouldn't we at some point not evolve? We would devolve, right?
Right.
So wouldn't that argument not make sense then?
Well, of course it doesn't. Yeah.
I have to do a question that with him. that's the part that's not making sense.
You can call him and ask him that, but yeah, absolutely. See, Richard Dawkins is a biologist. He's not a philosopher. And I read his book, The God Delusion, River Out of Eden, a couple of other books. You'll see so many logical fallacies, but he's not a critical thinker. He's just a biologist. He's an evolutionist. So you can read another book called, he wrote a book called The God Delusion. Okay, it's actually a pretty famous book on college campuses. The God Delusion. And there's another book by John Lennox, not John Lennon, John Lennox, who's also an apologist. And he called it Dawkins Delusion. And he shreds his arguments to pieces. And so he has a lot of faulty logic, let's put it that way. As do many atheists who just, yeah. Any comments or questions? I hope this equips you a little bit with some knowledge of the truth of what you believe in, and exposes the fallacies and the incoherence of those who don't believe in the existence of God. Abuna, if you want to add anything.
Maybe one thing.
Yes, hold on.
Oh, man.
Please. Thank you. I was going to say, your slide reminded me of natural selection is then like a good thing in terms of from an atheistic perspective. Natural selection and death is actually something to be celebrated because that allows the strong to survive, and so atheists should look at death as something actually wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Because you're fueling the universe with more particles and yeah. But I don't think they celebrate when someone in their community dies. That's a good point.